everyone's muted. So today, where are we? The 26th of August, 2023. It's the day we transition from the days of Broom into the days of Blackthorn. And I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint presentation and first of all talk us through some Blackthorn lore, which is really quite rich and interesting. And then further on, I'll talk about the medicine relating to the Blackthorn. So, there we go. Right. So today is the transition from Broom to Blackthorn, and that happens on the 3rd degree of Virgo. So on this diagram here, you can see Broom is mostly corresponding with Leo. The days of Broom go from Lunasa, the middle of Leo, until the 3rd degree of Virgo. And then Blackthorn is completely Virgo. An elder is half Virgo, half Libra. So this is the triple goddess of the Owen Grove, Broom being the maiden, Blackthorn holding the position of the mother, and elder the grandmother. And elder leads us into the autumn equinox and the descent into the darker months of the year for the northern hemisphere. So simplistically, then, you can see clearly how the star lore and therefore early religious symbolism of Blackthorn is going to be Virgo related. So it's all about the mysteries of Virgo as star lore studies. So here's a traditional depiction of Virgo. Normally, she's shown as a maiden, and the word Virgo is actually Latin for maiden. However, there's a curious thing that with the older mystery tradition, she's a mother, not a maiden. And I'll explain that further on. But Virgo always carries in her hand an ear of grain, an ear of wheat or something, sometimes an ear of corn. But basically, she is the goddess of the harvest time and the goddess of agriculture and cereals and grains and so on. So there is a very bright star in the constellation of Virgo, and that bright star is called Spica. And Spica literally means an ear of grain. So that's the bright star in the constellation of Virgo. Now, here's another depiction. I'll give you a moment to take it in, because Virgo is kind of got her back towards us and she's sideways. It's just how the map was, but it does help to figure things out. So looking at the far left, you can see the hind leg and the tail of Leo the lion. And on the right, you can see one of the dishes of the scales of Libra. So Virgo is here between Leo and Libra. Now she's got one hand pointing up, and her other hand below her is holding a load of wheat, what do you call it, a sheaf of wheat. And that's where the bright star Spica would be, in the sheaf of wheat. What's nice about this map is that you can also see in the bottom left-hand corner Crater, which we looked at in the last session. Crater is the heavenly grail, the wine mixing cup that belongs to the days of Broom, the first few days of Virgo. And next to Crater, in the middle at the bottom, is Corvus the crow. So with Broom, you have the heavenly grail or the cauldron that's there as a constellation. And then with Blackthorn, the mother herself in Virgo, this Corvus the crow, is her main secondary constellation. So it's an interesting star map. It depicts things quite well. So, although Virgo means maiden, primarily looking at ancient cultures, Virgo is the mother of the zodiac, definitely, and she's a cereal harvest time goddess. You could almost consider harvest to be her festival, her fest. You know, it would make much more sense because of the role that Virgo plays at harvest time. So I'm just going to show you how far back this actually goes. So there was, in ancient Mesopotamia, about 1000 BC, there was this harvest goddess that corresponded with Virgo called Shala. And she is often depicted with the bright star Spica, the ear of grain. And here's a diagram based on an old carving of her offering agricultural corn or grain to some worshippers or whatever. So the harvest goddess, the grain goddess, can be traced back to 1000 BC in Mesopotamia. Her name is Shala. In Egypt, there's this wonderful zodiac sky map, star map. It's more than the zodiac, it's all the constellations, but the zodiac's in there. This is from the Temple of Hathor in Dendera in Egypt. Now I'm going to zoom in. It'd be a little bit blurry. I haven't got a great quality photo, but here's a zoom in. So looking again then, on the left, you can see a circle and below it the scales of Libra. And in the middle, there's a female figure holding a grain of wheat or a grain of ear of wheat, whatever. Her name's Nepit, and she's Egyptian goddess of agriculture and grain and so on. And to the right is Leo the lion standing on Hydra the water serpent, and above Leo the lion is Cancer the crab, you know. So even in Egypt, the zodiac was being used as part of a bigger map of the sky, the star map itself. But interesting that 1000 BC, you've got Shala in Mesopotamia with her grain and Spica. And here in Egypt, you've got the Virgo effigy holding a piece of wheat or piece of corn or whatever it is, you know. So that's very old stuff. That's before we get to Greece and Rome, you know. So with the classical world, the Greek goddess of Virgo, the cereal grain goddess, was Demeter or Demeter. And she is a primary figurehead for ancient mystery traditions. She and her daughter, Proserpina, was the Greek original, which the Romans then adapted to their cereal goddess, Ceres or Ceres, you know. So for the Roman Empire, i.e. the Celtic world, because the Roman Empire squashed the Celtic tribes and made everything Romano-Celtic in the 1st century AD. So the Iron Age Celts and their descendants would be hearing about this cereal goddess relating to the harvest time. And they probably knew about it beforehand because they certainly traded with the Greek people, the Greek culture. You know, Julius Caesar says that the Druids refused to put their teachings down in writing, but they used Greek as a trade language. So elements of Greek culture would have found its way to the Celtic world long before the Roman Empire. But anyway, the same star lore, the same iconography comes with Ceres. Her daughter is Persephone, and she gets abducted and taken to the underworld and so on. So these are core elements of the ancient mystery traditions, especially a main one called the Eleusinian mysteries, which are a very complicated topic, but simplistically, all of the mystery traditions involve a descent into the darkness and a rite of passage, and the initiate gains wisdom, maybe through some sort of dark night of the soul, and then is reborn as an enlightened initiate. And that's carried through even into Welsh bardic lore with Caridwen and Taliesin. So we'll touch on that a little bit further on when we look at some of the star lore. So just to look at some of the lore of the Blackthorn itself. Now, it's often got quite a unpleasant presentation. In some books, they kind of, oh, it's bad magic. You shouldn't be near Blackthorn. Blackthorns are used for troublesome things. And there is an element of that. But from the Irish and Gaelic lore in the Ogham, there's a slightly different perspective. Not to beat about the bush, though, the blackthorn wood and its thorns is primarily a defensive wood, you know, so you have blackthorn hedges around your property to stop people getting in. And there's a really interesting reference in the Book of Ballymote about blackthorn. So there's a chapter called, in English, the Scholar's Primer. I'm not going to try and pronounce the Irish. But for blackthorn, it actually says, the word kenning for it is the hedge of a stream. Now, with that, you need to think about, okay, it's a hedge around a stream or the head of a stream. But in Irish sacred landscape and sovereignty, goddess of the land comprehension, all of the springs and streams were the Sheila na gig, or the vulva of the goddess of the land, and they were sacred places where the fresh drinking water comes out of the land. It's life, you know. Without fresh drinking water, there's death, you know. So the source of a spring is the most holy of holies because it's the life-giving water. So blackthorn is the hedge around the head of a stream. That is, the spikes and thorns of blackthorn protect the divine feminine and her sanctuary. More than anything, it's about protecting the divine feminine. You know, in the landscape, that's a spring or a stream or the source of a river. So blackthorn played that role. And of course, it finds its way into witchcraft lore as the smiting rod or blasting rod. And it does have that kind of aggressiveness to it. So this is a sample of blackthorn that I got from the coast in Cornwall at Boscastle, not far from the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle. But you can just see how incredibly vicious it is. You know, it is like barbed wire, and it's hard. It doesn't snap easy, you know. So you really cannot push your way through a blackthorn hedge, you know, not without cutting yourself to lots of pieces. You would have to hack at it with a sword or an axe, you know. So just like thorns on a rose, just like a hedgehog, you know, the thorns are really protection. They're about protecting the fruit of the blackthorn. They're about protecting the sanctuary of the divine feminine. And traditionally, a blackthorn rod or a blackthorn walking stick was the favored wood for witches. You know, again, magical women, that's their chosen protection. You know, the tree of the great goddess of the zodiac, goddess of the grain, and it's the protection of the divine feminine, is what I would say it is. then there, you know, in later witchcraft traditions, blackthorn as part of the blasting rod, the blackthorn thorns were used for piercing wax dolls to harm people. You know, how true that is, or how much of that is witchcraft coffee table books and Hammer horror films, I don't know. There's more immediate ways to hurt people if you want, you know, but more than anything, I would say blackthorn is protection. With possibly the exception in Ireland of the shillelagh. You know, the shillelagh is a club. It's short. It's not really a walking stick. It might be, God, not even 2 foot long, I guess, really, maybe 2 foot at the most. So it's not long enough to be a walking stick. You can see these examples have got straps to go around your wrist, you know, so it was like a policeman's truncheon or a cudgel or a club. And the way they were made is the bulbous bit at the top is actually the root ball. So it's a blackthorn hedge turned upside down. You know, they dug out the roots and saved that to be the head of the club. And blackthorn, as it gets older, its fibers contract, it gets harder and harder and harder, and it would be like being hit on the head by a metal truncheon. That's what it would feel like. You know, it would crack a skull quite easily. His examples of blackthorn walking sticks. So again, esoterically, it's a wood that gives you protection. And equally, if you needed to give someone a slap or blast someone, it has that magical affinity of protecting what it needs to protect. But it should be no more nasty than a wild animal, like a mother bear protecting her cubs. You know, it's nature can be red in tooth and claw if it needs to protect itself and protect its young. So blackthorn is the mother, it's the tree of the mother, and it's the protective spikes. So going into the lore of the mystery traditions, then here's I've turned it sideways on, but this is the third Acma where we are. It began with the days of Vine, bottom left. Then Ivy took us up to Lunacy. And then at Lunacy, the sun enters the days of Broom. And then today we transition from Broom into Blackthorn. So I've marked beneath Broom and Blackthorn descent into the mysteries. And that's because just above Broom, you can see where Leo and Virgo kiss each other. And the Leo-Virgo cusp was, in many ancient mystery traditions, the beginning. That's the moment of entering into the mystery traditions. And that seems to have certainly been played out in later Welsh lore, Bardic lore, with the story of Caridwen and Taliesin. Here's an icon based on all of this star lore then. So you can see at the bottom, Leo, Virgo, Libra. You can see how Crater, the cauldron, the wine mixing cup, corresponds with Broom, and that she's primarily Leo the lion, the golden-haired maiden goddess of the Holy Grail. You know, the middle cauldron is all there as star lore in the days of Broom. Now, in the days of Blackthorn, it's primarily the cereal goddess with her great sheaf of wheat and grain, and also the fruits of the harvest, which is what I've shown on her lap. So she is the goddess of the harvest festival, if you like, you know. And her constellation, apart from Virgo, is Corvus the crow, you know. And the final part of the trio is Elder, which we'll come to in 18 days' time. That she's half black, half white in her costume, because the middle of her is the autumn equinox and the descent into the darkness. So you can kind of see Broom at Lunacy welcoming initiates into participating into the mystery rites of initiation. And then Virgo, the goddess herself, is going to be overlooking that whole thing. And the mother thing is very important. Come back to that with Caridwen. And then with Elder, there is, okay, you go through the veil, you go through the door, you go down into the cave, and the door is shut behind you. And that's it. You've descended into the mysteries until spring equinox or Beltane, you know, so the following trees and the following months up until spring equinox Beltane is all underworld mystery rites, things to think about. So for Caridwen, there is this poster on the Facebook group, the Owen Grove. If you go to the files section, you can find a PDF poster of this, so you can zoom in and look at it. This is a diagram of the Caridwen Taliesin story, and I'm going to zoom in to the bottom left-hand area. But simplistically, there's the famous shape-shifting animal chase. The dog and the hare are Canis Major, the great dog, and Lepus the hare, the constellations. And then they run to a river, and there's the constellation of the river, Eridanus, and there's Pisces of fish. And then there's the two birds, Aquila the eagle and Cygnus the swan. And then after all those animal shape-shiftings, the boy sees a granary floor and lands on the granary floor and turns himself into a single grain of wheat to hide from Caridwen. But she's too clever. She sees what happens and she lands on the granary floor and turns herself into a black crested hen. So here's the interesting thing. If you look on the left-hand side, you've got Corvus the crow for the black crested hen, and you've got the bright star spiker of Virgo for the single grain of wheat, you know. And next to Corvus the crow is the cauldron, Caridwen's cauldron. Now, here's the magic in the story, if you like, and it makes Caridwen the divine mother. She consumes the grain of wheat, and she keeps the initiate, the young lad, the fool, inside her for 9 months, a full term of pregnancy. And then she gives birth to him at Beltane. So 9 months before Beltane is Lunacy. So this is Lunacy and the days of Broom leading to the mother goddess of the serial time of the zodiac, being the time when those who would be reborn, those who would go through rites of passage and become an initiated radiant brow, like Taliesin, this time, this Leo-Virgo cusp, is the time for entering into those mysteries. And of course, we'll talk about it afterwards, but we don't, apart from this story, which is Welsh Bardic lore, all we've got is classical Roman and Greek traditions of Ceres and Demeter and so on. So we would have to figure out how you would create a neo-Druidic or pagan mystery tradition. But the main map for planning that out would be the stars. The stars are telling that. And I think the Ogham helps, because after the autumn equinox, we're going to get into Samhain and the wild hunt, leading to the aspen tree and the idea of death, psychopomp into the next world, and then rebirth with the days of Yu at winter solstice. And then there's the rising again in the early spring at Imbolc, to the water's edge with the alder tree and the willow tree and the salmon's leap from Pisces into the spring equinox. So that's all there, potent star law iconography to suggest how a reinvented mystery tradition could play out. You know, what could be learned, what could be explored, what could be done ceremonially, and so on. This picture here is just to remind me that, you know, the Caridwen's cauldron element of Virgo and mystery rites and stuff is Welsh. And I do not know, I haven't got the knowledge, if there was an Irish harvest goddess, a goddess of the grain, a goddess of the mysteries. Is there an Irish equivalent to Caridwen? I don't know who she would be. Most of the Irish deity goddesses that I've kind of taken on board of late are kind of sovereignty goddesses to do with the land, a bit like Ellen of the Ways and Rhiannon and so on. But looking at the star law then, an Irish mother goddess of the mystery traditions would have symbolisms like the grain, like a daughter or son that was lost to the underworld, like a big crow, you know, because of Corvus the crow, and a cauldron. So any great mother goddess of Ireland with crows, you know, I'm tempted to say Morrigan, but I said Morrigan is protective, you know, she protects the Duatha de Danann. So she does have that kind of Blackthorn-esque protective quality. But I'm still learning that there's a lot of Irish lore I don't know. Yeah, so maybe someone can inform me. So Blackthorn medicine then. Most people are familiar with Blackthorn as the sloe berries, commonly used to make sloe gin. You get a bottle of gin, you empty half of it into a jug, and then you fill up the bottle with loads of sloe berries that have been pricked. It takes quite a long time to prick them. You want to prick each berry a few times and gradually fill up the bottle. So the bottle is actually half sloe berries and half gin. And then you leave it for a few months, and then by Christmas, you've got sloe gin, which goes a lovely kind of dark burgundy color. It's a lovely thing. One of the Briatharoam word kennings for Blackthorn is the strongest of reddening, the strongest red. And I would say that's the burgundy of its juice. Now, you don't have to just do sloe gin. You can just boil the berries. They're very sour and astringent to eat raw. But once you boil them, it changes. They become quite sweet, like cherries. And you can strain off the boiled juice and drink it just like cherry juice. It's really, really lovely, full of good things. But medicine-wise, both the flower and the berry are used medicinally. So you can make a tea out of the flowers, the dried flowers. And just reading my writing. So the blackthorn flower tea is a diuretic. It helps to remove fluid retention, and it helps the kidneys. The berries can also be drank as a tea. So sloe gin, boil it for cherry juice, or you can dry the berries and rehydrate them with hot water as blackthorn berry tea, and you can buy those online quite easy enough. So that's, in a way, that's quite good because they're available all year round. You don't just have to grab them while you can, you know. So the rehydrated berries in hot water as a tea are good for the common cold, good for cough, good for fatigue. they calm the nerves, quite interesting. And they're a general tonic that helps the kidneys and the gallbladder, and they improve digestion. So that's the basic medicine that you can get from the blackthorn, is drinking tea of the dried flowers or drinking berries. The Iron Age Lake Village at Glastonbury, the archaeologists found outside all their Iron Age roundhouses piles of pips from slowberries. So the Iron Age Celts in Glastonbury were using slowberries in a big way in their cooking or what have you. Oops. So the mushroom I chose for the days of blackthorn, I was going to choose psilocybin, but I decided to leave that for the elder tree, because in Britain and England, the psilocybin mushroom tends to pop up in the fields at the end of September rather than early September. So that's why I decided to wait. And also, from looking at a few sites on the internet, a few people are saying that the psilocybin liberty cap mushrooms, magic mushrooms, are turning up later and later. That it used to be late September, but now it's mid-October before they're appearing, whether that's global warming or Mother Nature doing whatever she does, but it's interesting. So there's one reason why I've decided to wait until elder, but we will look at the liberty cap psilocybin before we enter autumn equinox. Puffballs then. Puffballs roughly correspond with late summer. They're amazing fungi, really fun to look at as well, very unusual. And they can become huge. Look how big this one is. Incredible. When they're great big ones like this, they're totally edible, just like regular mushrooms from the supermarket, and they taste the same texture and everything. But they're big and solid. And as a great big puffball, you can cut it into slices, like slices of bread, and cook it that way. And people in the past even used thick slices of puffball to bandage wounds. It's a natural bandage that will help stop the flow of blood and a nice soft padding around the wound that you're bandaging. Not available all year round, of course, but something to be aware of. I guess you can dry it. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be, although it's completely edible, it doesn't seem to be a mushroom that's available to buy online. They can buy packets of most dried mushrooms, but I guess the puffballs are just too big to do. But medicinally, they're high in protein, high fiber, and high in potassium. And they've been shown to help against lung cancer, and also to help with reducing sugar for type 2 diabetes as well. So, all these mushrooms. I don't think there's any mind-altering things to do with the puffball. It's just a good food mushroom. But will start appearing late summer, early autumn. So worth looking out for if you can find some. So the flower I chose just for this time of year, in many ways, I would have chose poppy, but we already did poppy. Poppy goes very well with the harvest goddess and the fields of grain. But cornflower is a field of grain flower as well. And what's amazing is it's packed with medicinal qualities. But a lot of modern farmers who don't want weeds and invasive plants in their grain crop fields poison them away with weed killer and so on. The irony is that the poppy and the cornflower would just grow happily with the grain, and you're losing all of that medicine by killing the weeds, like there is such a thing as a weed. Primarily then, cornflower can be drank as a tea. You get the flowers and you dry them, and you can buy this online. You can buy blue cornflower petals and drink it. So there's lots of benefits with cornflower tea. Antibacterial, antifungal, anti-inflammatory. It's an antioxidant. It helps with fevers, constipation, water retention, chest congestion. It's a general good tonic for the liver and the gallbladder. And for ladies, it helps with menstrual disorders, and specifically helps with vaginal yeast infection. So interesting that it's a powerhouse, cornflower tea. Yeah. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll just shut the sharing of the PowerPoint down, and we can talk about some of those ideas. So you can put your microphones on.
Thank you, Yuri. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think regarding the mystery traditions, the famous one is the Eleusinian mysteries, but there's also others. That's why I was kind of thinking it needs at least a whole hour to look at all of the different types of mystery traditions that were around. And yeah, Caridwen's cauldron corresponds with the Leo-Virgo cusp. And there's also a statue from ancient Gaul of Canunus. And the iconography of that Canunus statue is all about the Leo-Virgo cusp. And he's pouring grain out of a sack, so there's lots of snippets here and there that suggest that as much as the Greeks and the Romans had mystery traditions, so too did the Celts, with Caridwen and with Canunus, And once you start taking on board the star lore, I think you would find it in other stories. You'd be able to decode the mythologies.
I do have a comment. As a student of the Eleusinian mysteries, Proserpine is the Roman version of the Greek Persephone, and I think you might have said it backwards.
I did. I got them back to front. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So if anyone took notes on that, there you go.
So Persephone is the daughter of Demeter.
Yes, and she's Flora. I mean, she's Flora in the Roman, and Kore, which just means maiden. Before she goes to the underworld, she's the innocent Kore.
And then she becomes Persephone.
Yes. So Persephone is the queen of the underworld. She's very powerful and is very wealthy and has all the gems and minerals of the entire underworld at her disposal.
Yeah. So I was thinking like a basic pattern then with Demeter and Persephone. So there's the mother goddess and her daughter, and then the lord of the underworld kidnaps her or something. So you've got three main characters. You've got the mother goddess, a young maid daughter, and a dark male figure. And that's there in the Caridwen thing, because Caridwen has a beautiful daughter and she has an ugly son, and the ugly son's called Morvran, which means great crow, Corvus the crow. But that kind of the image of the goddess and the maiden and a dark male figure is there as well. So with Demeter and Persephone, it's Hades, is it, that takes Cora?
In the Greek and Pluto in the Roman.
Yeah. So how do you say Ceres and Proserpina or Proserpina?
I don't know how to pronounce Proserpina correctly, but I think someone might. I mostly study the Greek, so I don't get to. The Romans really didn't use the mysteries. They added them into their lifestyle when they kind of overtook the Greek civilized version of the cultures. But mostly the Eleusinian mysteries survived in Eleusis, Greece, for thousands of years, and people kept the secrets. We don't really know what happened in the Telesterion and what what was in the Kaikion and what happened, and what was their initiation process. It's a wonderful mystery that just never was told by everyone. All those people,
Yeah,
thousands.
kept it secret. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there were others, you know, so figures like Dionysus and Bacchus and Orpheus were mystery tradition figures. And of course, the Roman legionaries had Mithras as well, you know, so and there were Icean mysteries. And so that the ancient world was full of all of these different mystery schools.
Yes. So I wanted to comment also about the Irish possibility for the harvest goddess. So
Yeah.
Anya and Grania are sisters, and
Okay.
they are both summer golden queen, are actually maiden figures. And Anya has a terrible story of rape, and just she has a tragic kind of, as if it's Persephone to the underworld kind of association, and a sad tale, but then the hope at the end that it works out for her. But they don't go into the rebirth possibility as much as might be desired by those of us who want the rebirth thing. So I might find out more when I'm in Ireland this time.
I was I was aware of Anya as a kind of sovereignty goddess of the relating to the summer solstice time. I don't know much about Grania. Is she the summer solstice, or is she later to harvest time?
Well, it's a problem in my research. You know, Olivia Robertson calls her the summer solstice goddess, and then Courtney Davis, who isn't Irish but lives there and has been doing a lot of this mythology work, he would prefer Anya as a summer solstice. So the jury's still out as far as I can go in my English speaking studies.
Yeah.
Yuri, I really liked all your herbal things for the slow and also the cornflower. I have a corn fairy essence which appeared to me in a crop circle, I think in 2008. And it was interesting because I think it's the Aztec, I'm saying the Aztecs or the Mayans, they have an ancient goddess, and she ground the corn to create the golden race. And yeah, and I can't remember, I'm sorry. You know how it is, you read lots of different books and what have you. I think it was the Mayans.
I think Xochitl.
And it's, pardon?
X starts with an X. Xochitl. I don't know how to say that either. Is that the one?
I can't remember her name. All I know was that she was revered for grinding the corn. And that's what I saw with this corn fairy when it appeared in this crop circle. I wondered what it was to begin with. And Michael, who used to manage the Chalice Well, appeared just afterwards, out of nowhere. It's very strange. But it was spinning really quickly. Actually, I think Elizabeth was there with her American group.
Right.
And it was that one. I don't know if you're there, Elizabeth. It was when that one came down and there was half of it was off into the next field. And the cows were, when you saw the photograph, the cows were all in position, completing this circle. It was very strange, but it was definitely spinning and grinding. So the corn fairy is bringing this, it's like the birthing, you know, which is very Virgo.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Another thing that is dawning to me as we're talking is, of course, different counties in England have different traditions, but a lot of them have a making of a corn dolly at harvest time with the last ears of wheat, don't they? And that's clearly representing a divine female in some way.
Yeah.
But then it also made me think that the whole lunar consumption of the grain and it being inside Caridwen for 9 months. So at Lunar is the seed going in, and then it's throughout the winter it's gestating in the dark soil, and then come Imbolc, people suggest that Imbolc means in the belly, and the belly would be showing signs of pregnancy, and you've got the lore of Brigid Bridie being a midwife thing, and then of course then birthing at Beltane. But all of that, there's in my head, there's another type of corn dolly is the Brigid cross, or sometimes it's a three-spoked kind of Triskelion type thing. But it's interesting that at this time you could be making a Brigid's cross that's going to go through to Imbolc, the festival of Bridie. You know, it's kind of like holding the energy of the divine female until the birth of spring during the months of darkness. Just thoughts.
Would you make that out of a green stalk of hay or wheat straw? Is that what you're thinking?
I think you'd make it. Yeah, you'd make it green because it's bendable, and then it would just dry, wouldn't it? You know, but a lot of them are full heads of wheat. You know, you can see the seeds there. That they use that in the design of the corn dollies. So it's not just the grass stems; it is actually heads of wheat there as well.
And why do you think the triad rather than the four direction cross? You said that. I kind of missed that possibility of it. The triple goddess.
Yeah, I mean, triple goddesses are a thing with the Celts, aren't they? So, and the Triskelions a big thing in Ireland and the Isle of Man, and so on. But I don't know. Yeah. My friend Gary Biltcliffe did a book called Power of Centre, and on the front cover, I painted the front cover for him, but he had a three-spoked Brigid's cross on the front cover, and he said that was traditionally the traditional one rather than the equal armed cross. That the three spokes was more traditional.
Yeah, but got 33. We've got 33 crossing our spine, nodes on our spine, which makes 33 crossings on our spine, and there's 33 crossings on the spine of Albion, which is a double up 3. It's a double up 3. So 3 double 3 up 33, and also completion after 9 back to 1. So 9 is a completion number, which is again a triple 9 is 999. Who do we ring? The outside world for protection. Well, that's total rubbish, but you know, 9, it's all sabotage, isn't it? But it's like this whole 999. You ring 99. That's a triple 9. But the doubles and triple numbers.
Another thing is that Virgo is governed by Mercury, and Mercury's number is 3. You know, so dividing Mercury or dividing the Virgo goddess into a trio is a logical thing to do as well.
And also Blackthorn's opposite Pisces, which is the mermaid, Mercury, it's the same mare again, isn't it? It's the mare, the waters.
That's the 9 maidens.
Gone back to water again, which you were mentioning before, about how sacred the holy water is. So the holy water of the goddess and her source water, whether it be on a mountain or her giving birth, the baby comes forth from the waters of the goddess. And what do? They stick a thorn of crowns on it, a thorn on his head as soon as he's born. A blackthorn. And then the blood, I mean, obviously the blood does flow in birth, but they've got the blood, you stick someone's crown, blackthorn on there, but that goes back to the waters of the goddess breaking and the whole, this baby coming forth from the goddess, from the shield and the gig, and you've got the blackthorn on the head, and you know, like this whole, so it obviously is connecting in some sort of way, isn't it? In the 9 months, yeah.
Today I was thinking about Sheila and the gig, and I extended it to Sheila and the giggles, and but that made me laugh. But I also thought about a small trickle of water, the beginning of a stream, being very bubbly. And bubbling out and bubbling over the pebbles, you know, so Sheila and the giggles as source of a stream. I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah. Well, there's the yin water as well. There's the one coming down from
That's
the cloud,
great, Yuri.
and there's the one that comes up from the earth as well. The yin water that comes up from the earth. So that's been born, and that's quite a sacred water. The one that comes up through the earth. That I think they call it yin water, bringing all the minerals and elements with it.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those wells have disappeared now.
Couple of things just as they're floating through my brain. I forgot to say that Blackthorn in French is known as la mère de bois. La mère means the mother. So, and la mère de bois means the mother of the woods. So that's the French name for Blackthorn. So it's interesting, all of the mother stuff to it.
So does mère means woods in French?
No, it means mother. M-E-R. Mère.
And then we've got the horse, the mare, the horse mare. So that's tying in with the horse as well, isn't it?
Could do. Could be Chinese in some way.
Yeah. Is the mare the female or the male? I can't remember now. Horse.
It's the female.
Yeah.
It's the female horse.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Male's Italian.
That's Rihanna then. Rihanna. Yeah. The triple goddess. I think you talked about that last time, Yuri, when you said the triple. Rihanna's the triple. The three birds of Rihanna, 3 again, and the 7. What did you say? The 7 somethings. 3 birds of Rihanna. But that's 3 birds of Rihanna. But Rihanna is also the horse. She's the mare.
But in this case, mare is also the ocean. So M-E-R is more likely water, the great mother of us all, the ocean, rather than the horse. But it's an interesting wordplay, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when you get the ocean doing this, they have the horses on the ocean. You know that the ocean does this, and the horses ride the ocean.
Another thing, my friend Alan told me a long time ago was the way fire and water were used in the ancient world in a very simple way. So fire and smoke always go upwards. So simplistically, fire and smoke or incense was used for praying. So sending a request up to the spirit world, you use fire or smoke. And the polarity of that is water. That water always finds its way down, always finds its way downhill. So Alan was saying that smoke and fire were used to send requests or prayers to the spirit world, but you go to the source of a spring or a well to listen to the reply. It's a really lovely idea. And a lot of holy wells have this kind of oracle head or voice of wisdom going on with them, you know. And again, Blackthorn is protecting the head of a stream. So it's almost protecting the sanctuary where you hear the reply from heaven.
Yeah. Water goes both ways though, doesn't it? Because that's how clouds are made. But we can listen to the water because we can feel it rising from the and that ties in with the salmon as well, doesn't it? So the salmon are swam upstream. They don't swim upstream, they swam upstream back to source. And source would be where the spring is.
And that's what the mystery traditions were trying to do. They were trying to get the initiates to connect with the source and remember all of the lives they previously had, you know, to know thyself, have gnosis of your higher self, your eternal self.
Yuri, something that's true for me is like earlier this year at a party, I was eating loads of the flowers, and they taste like quite aniseedy, which is quite nice.
What flowers?
The blackthorn flowers.
Okay.
Like marzipan, actually. They taste like marzipan. They're really quite nice. And yeah, I hung up a like a a hoop of Blackthorn flowers at a party we held, and some people were getting a bit upset, like, oh, you shouldn't be having a hoop of Blackthorn above the dance floor. It's a bit like, it's black magic and all that. And I didn't think so at all. It's like, it's totally beautiful, but it makes me think that there's like a bit of a thing of, yeah, if it is such a protective thing and people not acknowledging that things need protecting, and not actually wanting to protect the feminine either. So it's almost like, don't even think about protection, because it's it probably, maybe, that's because it is effective.
A big hedge of it around your home is going to protect your family and your loved ones, or maybe even druidic groves and nematons were surrounded by blackthorn and blackberry and other thorny things to keep people out, keep a sanctuary clear.
Or keep your shillelagh by your front door.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I think you've got a few ideas for your blackthorn walking stick now. Yeah. But the proper meaning of the word witch, it literally translates in Old English as a woman who knows things, a knowing woman, just like wizard is a wise person. So a witch is just a woman who knows stuff, the stuff she knows. But that's more than likely going to be a mature woman that's got some life experience and knows what can kill and cure in the hedges and all the rest of it and stuff. So the blackthorn is protecting that feminine that knows stuff. So the witches having blackthorn walking sticks makes total sense to me.
I wonder if anyone's come across the book, The Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets by Barbara G. Walker.
No.
Oh, yeah. Bible. It's the Bible.
It's literally the Bible, isn't it?
It is.
It's so, Yuri, you've got to get that book. The Women's Encyclopedia of
Say it again.
The Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets by Barbara G. Walker. It traces so many magical terms, like occult words and things, back to the old goddess religions.
Okay.
It is a really fantastic reference book. Well worth the money.
No, I'll look for it, definitely. Yeah.
Well, interestingly, it was 411 years ago, I think last week or about 5 days ago, when the witches of Pendle were hung.
That's where you live?
Yeah. There was a group of people who went up to Lancaster, but I didn't go to it. But so that was a 411, and interestingly, for probably about 2 months, all I see on my phone when I go on my phone is like 411, 11:4. So I keep seeing those numbers all the time. But yeah, I just take that what is out there. So if society if people believe something is not good, like blackthorn, it's because it's been instilled into their minds it's not good, and that's because it probably is good. Yeah,
but it's protective and it's also good medicine,
so totally good medicine. It's really good medicine. Yeah. And also she's right now we're harvesting all the fruits, whether it's berries for the Sloan Jane or blackberries or cornflowers. I mean, I've been getting my cornflowers here. I've got loads of cornflowers. Whatever we're harvesting in for the fruits, they belong to us. So it's blackthorn. She's bringing our fruits in. She's bringing them in, and then we incubate them for 9 months. We do what we want with them. It's our wheat to take where we want it to take to, and then we come out again, and she's there in the flowers for the next session, and it's no fear. There's no fear.
And sometimes to protect her children, the mother needs sharp claws and sharp teeth. but that's
yeah.
totally natural. Even in the story of Anya, the summer goddess, she was raped by a man who would be king, so he wanted her as sovereignty goddess, but she bit his ear off. So although she was raped, she maimed him with her teeth, so he couldn't be king. In Ireland, you couldn't be king if you were deformed in any way. So although he raped her, she destroyed any chance of kingship in him by biting his ear off.
Right. Okay.
That's sharp teeth and claws when they're needed, you know. So she protected the people of the land from a Donald Trump bad king. You know?
Thank you, Anya. So I have one quick thing just to add, which is about the grain. You know, you make, say, rye whiskey is made from a grain. It's very common in this country, and it's the spirit of the grain, and it survives through the winter as the whiskey and offers conviviality, and you can put other herbs into it to store them as well. So that's a really interesting relationship of the wheat becoming spirit over the winter until, well, it can't get planted again, but there's one thing about it.
Whether it's mead or some sort of whiskey or something made from the grain, it's a way of preserving lots of other medicines as well, isn't it? You know, you can keep it in the alcohol and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
It's time to do the meditation, so I'm going to stop recording and you can turn your microphones off.